Charles Dickens wrote a book called Hard Times, and in that there's several characters in that book, and two characters that spring to mind. One was Susie and one is Stephen, and they were both kind of low-level characters. They didn't appear at the start of the story to be the main characters. They had little money, they were dependent on other people, and they went through real difficulties in their life. But as the book goes on, as the story goes on, you see them emerging more and more, as really the book is in some ways about them, about the values they hold dear, and about how that quiet going about their business, quiet doing their life the way they believe is the right way to live life, gradually impacts the people round about them, until the end of the story you're left just thinking about Susie. Stephen dies a death that's a horrible death, didn't do anything wrong, it was all unjust, and you find yourself getting caught up a little bit in his life, where that sense of injustice and hope that there must be something beyond death that would maybe right some of the wrongs that were done to him. And we're going to touch on that theme today, hard times, when we look at Psalm 88. The Bible has a share of stories of people who go through hard times. You don't have to think too hard to think about Jonah stuck in the belly of a whale. We can think about Moses in the desert, Joseph being dropped down into the cistern in the desert by his family, Job losing everything, family, fields, fortune, everything going, Peter in distress as he realises that he's walked away from Jesus, and Judas in black despair. Perhaps, though, no passage quite catches something the way that Psalm 88 does. Psalm 88 is from a group of psalms called the Psalms of Lament, but it's lacking some of what we would normally recognise in the Psalms of Lament. Usually in a Psalm of Lament we'll see a sense of confidence of God and a vow of praise. We'll see this idea that through the clouds a shaft of light, that this little bit of light in the dark tunnel, that something is pushing back, that there is hope, that there is a way forward, and that there is going to be a good outcome at the end. But when we read Psalm 88, we're not sure that that's there. We're not really sure. If we look at some of the other psalms that are counted as Psalms of Lament, we can see in Psalm 44 and 26, and it says, "Rise up and help us, rescue us because of your loyal love." In Psalm 60:12, "With God's help you will do mighty things, for he will trample down our foes." And in Psalm 74, "But God is my king from long ago, he brings salvation on the earth." So we see in that first example this sense of the psalmist recognising that God will rescue him because of who God is. And in the second psalm we see that, in Psalm 60 there, we see that God is able to move on our behalf, and our foes have got no chance of standing against them, and he'll do mighty things. And these are Psalms of Lament. They catch the real woe, the real struggle, the real difficulties that the writers are going through or that they're aware of, and yet still emerging as this little glimpse of "but God" or "suddenly God." And here in Psalm 74 we see that "but God is my king from long ago, he brings salvation on the earth." And so we sense that this writer is not even just thinking about himself, but thinking about the earth. He's thinking about the mightiness of God that brings salvation, not just to him personally, but to loads of people across the face of the earth. So Psalm 88 is a rare passage of scripture we're just going to look at in a minute. It has echoes and reverberations through the Bible. We catch glimpses of it here and there in different stories. But in some ways it's unique, because when we read it, we're waiting for this glimpse to come through the clouds. We're waiting for this ray of light. We're waiting for this aspect of hope or future hope or purpose or breakthrough. And we get to the end of the psalm and it's not there. And if you're like me, you probably go back and read it again thinking, "Oh, I must have missed it." And you read it again and you go, "No, it's not there." There is no statement of hope. There is no breakthrough moment in this psalm. So let's take a look at Psalm 88. We'll just run through a few of the verses. So in Psalm 1 we see that in Psalm 88 verse 1 we see that it starts off with, "Lord, you are the God who saves me. Day and night I cry out to you. So we get this instance that yes, he knows who God is, the writer. He knows that God is the God who saves him. And he's looking to God to do that, to save him. And he says, may my prayer come before you. Turn your ear to my cry. And in that word turn, we get this aspect of stretching out. This hidden in that word, and the meaning of it is this idea of stretching out. In other words, stretching out, leaning in, as if the psalmist is saying, God, would you come close to me? Would you come so close that not only do you hear my words, but you hear the tone of my voice. You hear the anguish in my heart. You catch the distress of my life. He's calling God, he's calling out to God in this desperate place and saying, please, come so close that you really catch where I'm at. Don't take time to come in and listen and catch the tone, catch the sense of where I'm at, God, and come and rescue me, come and help me. I'm overwhelmed with troubles, it says in verse 3. Overwhelmed with troubles, and my life draws near to death. And that word death can be expanded, if you like, to in some versions it talks about Sheol, or Hades it would be in the Greek. And that word death, in a sense, it doesn't just, we think about death maybe on an individual basis where maybe this is one person and they're dying. But that captures a much bigger picture than that. When he talks about my life, it draws near to a place where all there is death. Hades was a place that was just full of death. There was nothing but death. Everywhere you looked was death. It wasn't one person in a bed slowly dying. It was a hole to the horizon, as far as you could see, was all death. So he's talking about this picture, this growing picture of this terrible place he finds himself in. I'm counted like among those who go down to the pit, he says. I'm like one without strength. And that pit, in the Hebrew, catches the sense of like a smoking pit, and if we see it in the Greek, it catches a sense of mud and filth, and it's the kind of place that nobody in their right mind maybe would think about going. It's the kind of place where only outcasts would be found, or people who've got no hope, or people who are of ill intent. It wouldn't be a place that people would go normally. He goes there and he says he's like one without strength. And then we come across this little bit in verse 5 where it says, I'm set apart with the dead, like the slain who lie in the grave, whom you remember no more. And I think in that, we catch our first glimpse perhaps of that prophetic edge of Jesus. And we think about Jesus crying out on the cross, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me, it says in the NIV. Why do you remember me no more? Jesus himself was remembered no more. He was cut off from God. He was like set apart with the dead. He was slain to lie in the grave. And we catch that this psalmist, perhaps thousands of years before Jesus came, was experiencing something that was going to speak to generations to come about what Jesus walked through. That sense of betrayal, that sense of abandonment. In verse 6, we find that word put in the lowest pit. Put in the lowest pit, not just the pit. And so again, it's that amplification, and he's talking about God has put him in the lowest pit. So it's not like he's fallen in the lowest pit, or he's made a mistake and ended up in the lowest pit, or he's done something that deserves for him to be in the lowest pit. He's put in the responsibility, the blame, if you like, on God and said, you have put me in the lowest pit. And in other words, there's nowhere lower. He can't get in a worse, there's nowhere worse for him to go. There is nothing worse that can happen to him than what he's going through just now. In verse 7, your wrath lies heavily on me. And that word wrath catches with it the sense of heat. So it's like the heat of God's wrath lies heavily on me, or your hot wrath lies heavily on me. And that sense of the personal sense there, how close is God to him that he can feel the heat of his anger, and yet he's calling for him to come close so that he can get his ear. He doesn't want the anger, he wants God's ear. And then he says, you have made me repulsive to them in verse 8. And that word repulsive is in the NIV comes out as abomination. And when I read that word, I remember thinking, my goodness, is there a worse word? Can anything get any worse? How could you describe your life if said to my closest friends I'm an abomination? I can't imagine a word that could describe like a worse situation. That's as bad as it gets. I'm confined and cannot escape. My eyes are dim with grief, and that actually can be translated with affliction. So there's this sense where things are escalating, if you like. It's like it starts off in the pit, then it's the deepest pit, then it's the sense of the hot wrath, and then abomination, and then affliction. And you do pick up a sense in this that the writer has got no understanding that he's done anything wrong. He's not saying, oh God, I've erred in my ways, or oh God, I've done something wrong, or oh God, forgive me. It's really like the sense that he's been walking as uprightly as he possibly can, but this is still all happening to him, and he can't understand why God's not breaking in and making a difference. And then we go into this next section between verse 9 and verse 12, and we catch this idea that the writer's saying, look, if I was dead I could understand. If I was dead I wouldn't expect you to break in. I wouldn't expect to hear from you. I wouldn't be really thinking that you might speak to me, because if I was dead I'd be beyond that. I'd be into a whole different experience. But God, I'm not dead. Yes, I'm close to death. Yes, I'm as close to death as I can imagine I can be without being dead. And sometimes wish I was dead. But I'm not. And God, I can't understand why you're not speaking to me, why you're not breaking in, why there's no sense of relief. And this is not just a few days that this has been going on. And again in that verse 9 we catch that spread out my hands to you, and there's perhaps a glimpse there again of Christ on the cross, that beseeching, God, why have you forsaken me? In that place that perhaps none of us really know that much about. But I cry out to you for help in the morning, my prayer comes before you. Why, Lord, do you reject me and hide your face from me? It says in verse 13 and 14. Is it possible that in every situation God is enough? That even if God doesn't speak, that's enough? Just knowing that God's there is enough. What do we do if we're in this situation where our life's not working out the way we expected to? And that's probably an understatement for Psalm 88. It's not like his life's just not working out because he didn't quite get the house he wanted, or he didn't quite get the job he wanted, or he didn't quite get the whatever he wanted, the things that he wanted weren't quite falling into his lap. It's much more than that. He actually talks about being overwhelmed. Being overwhelmed, like waves overwhelming him. And it made me think about being at the beach and being in big waves. And when you're in a big wave, you can be tumbled and there's nothing you can do. It's like the force of that wave is got control of your life, and until it spits you out, you've got no ability to go in any certain direction. And so that's the sense that this writer's in. That he's going, oh God, you've completely got my life and it's not where I expected it to be. In fact, I feel like I'm in the worst place I could possibly be, and actually wonder if I would be better off being dead. But I'm not dead, and God, I can't understand why you're not speaking to me. And then I guess he sums it up at that last line, darkness is my closest friend. I guess that whole idea, when I read that line, it made me think, what's your life like when your closest friend is darkness, your neighbour, you've taken everything from me? And again, the accusation is straight against God. You have taken from me my friend and neighbour. You have put me in the deepest pit. So he's really given the responsibility to God here, saying, God, you've done this to me. You're the author. You're the person that creates the circumstances of my life. You've called me into this situation. You've led me into this situation. And I'm standing here crying out to you, waiting for that release, Lord, and it's just not coming. And I guess that takes me on to Philippians 3:10, which I think really kind of, in some ways, really sums up Psalm 88. I want to know Christ, yes, to know the power of his resurrection and participation in his sufferings, becoming like him in my death. How many of us really want that? How many of us, we sing at church, I want to be like you, Jesus, or I surrender all, or I give my all to you. We make these incredible statements of faith about how we'll follow Jesus everywhere or anywhere, or we'll step out of the boat, we'll do all these amazing things. But when we read the Bible, we see that actually participation in his sufferings is part of the call of the Christian. And I heard somebody just last night talking about saying God's not a superhero who sweeps in and just saves the day every time you're in difficulty, and just pulls you out of that difficult and changes your circumstances so everything's kind of Disney again, or Hollywood. That's not God. God will sometimes be silent, sometimes be remote. He's still there, but you're not necessarily hearing from him. And the question is that enough? Will we push on when all we've got to hang on to is the fact that God is there, and we know that God does love us? We don't maybe see the evidence of it in our circumstances. We don't maybe feel it in our emotions, but we know it to be the truth. And in that situation, will we find what Christ had? Will we find that Holy Spirit power rising up us and pushing on and going, yes, even in this dark situation, I will push him, I will serve my God.